All right, so today the talk will be a DBA in the age of Kubernetes operators, evolving roles and collaboration. And of course, that's being presented by DOK Ambassador Divine Odazi. He's a technology evangelist at Several Nines. So I want to give a special thank you to our Platinum community sponsor, EDB. Because of the sponsorship allows us to do these things like these live events. Also, of course, we have things like DOK Day at KubeCon coming up, and that also can't happen without sponsorship. Speaking of which, also want to thank EDB and Prefect for being event sponsors. So that's what allows us to be doing the co-located events at KubeCon, which has been great, getting more eyeballs on DOK. You should still register if you want to attend in London. It'll be on April 1st with all the other co-located events. You scan the QR code there and register. I believe the prices just went up, so I don't think it will go up anymore until maybe like the day of or something. The prices might go up, but you do need to purchase an all access pass if you want to attend the co-located events, and that will give you access to DOK Day as well as the other co-located events. But again, special thank you to our event sponsors, EDB and Prefect. Really appreciate that. I just want to let you all know, if you haven't heard about this yet, we have this project that we worked on with the DOK SIG, which was the Get Started Guide. So that's a community-driven document, which is meant to help kind of kickstart people's journey into running stateful or data workloads on Kubernetes. So thank you to all the people that contributed. We're always accepting more contributions. So if you feel like you want to add something to it, all you need to do is submit a PR, and we'll review it and let you know if it aligns with our guide. So yeah, check that out if you are just getting started with DOK. I just want to remind everybody that the 2024 Data on Kubernetes report came out earlier or towards the end of the year. It's available. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to the website. There's a link to the report. Some interesting data showing some shifts in the area. So yeah, check that out. So we have a couple upcoming events which are exciting. We have Jonathan Battiato, who's another DOK ambassador. He's going to be talking about cloud native PG and running Postgres in the Kubernetes way. So you should check that out. That'll be a couple weeks on March 6th. And then in honor of International Women's Day or month, we're having a panel. Oops, I forgot to change the names there. With some women in the community. So that'll be with Karen Jex, Lori Russo, and Francis Tai, and they'll be talking about different aspects of DOK. So we're really excited about that. Check out the schedule, and you can register on Meetup. More details to follow on what the panel will be about, but it's exciting. We're excited for that. Okay, so if you are interested in getting more involved in the community, you can scan the QR code on the left. If you're interested in sponsoring the community, you can scan the QR code on the right. All this information is available on our website. Or you can always just reach out to me, which is Paul at dok.community. All right, so I'm gonna get started here. Now, bear with me. Let me know once I start if you can hear. If not, I'll make some adjustments. So 1 second here. All right, so without further ado, if you didn't hear earlier, Divine is not here live, but he did pre-record his session. So by the way, if you have questions, you could reach out to Divine on Slack. He's on the DOK Slack, or on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me and I can pass them along, because I'm sure there'll be some questions, and he'd love to answer those whenever he has the availability. So, all right, I'm gonna share that. Of course, yeah, remember, let me know if you can't hear. And I will, once I play this video, and I will make some adjustments. All right, thanks.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's Data on Kubernetes Community Town Hall. So today I'll be exploring a DBA in the age of Kubernetes operators. So firstly, about me, my name is Divine Odazie. I'm a technology evangelist at Several Nines, a company that helps organizations take control of their data, right, while enjoying the benefits of enterprise level DBAs. I'm also an electronics electrical electronics engineer and a certified Kubernetes engineer, and very proud of the fact that I'm a database on Kubernetes ambassador, right? Data on Kubernetes ambassador. And I'm very much excited to speak at today's DOK Community Town Hall. So what are we going to look at this call, right? First of all, we'll look at Kubernetes and databases. Then we'll look at why the perceived decline. I don't know if you had the time to read the description of the talk, right? Then we'll go into the DBA's continued importance in the Kubernetes era. Then we will now look at how DBAs can thrive in the cloud native ecosystem, which involves learning the skills, right, and also collaborating with Kubernetes and other engineers in an organization. So let's set the levels, right? So I'm not a DBA, right, but I work with DBAs, right, and I work at a company that builds the database automation software, right? So I have some skin in the game, and I've been part of the data on Kubernetes community for 3 years now. So I believe I have some understanding on like what's been done before, right, and what is currently happening now. So first, Kubernetes and databases, right? So we already know this, right? Be if you've just joining the community now or you've been using Kubernetes for a while. So Kubernetes was originally designed for stateless workloads, right? So we will not like dwell on that, but this sets the foundation, right? But then again, Kubernetes morphed over the years in order to solve the challenges of like of deploying stateful workloads on Kubernetes, right? So we came about stateful sets, right? Stateful sets, like they are like deployments, but they are specifically for managing stateful applications, right? And like they maintain a sticky identity for each pod, right? And also jobs for training data sets in like in the ML world, and also for scheduling backups and all, right? Plus other components that work together to deploy a stateful workload. Then now, like beyond deployment, right, in database software and all of that types of software, right, there is the two operations. So the two operations like backups and high availability upgrades and all, right. So custom resource definitions were created, which brought about like operators, which helps like organizations, which is the most advised way, right, to deploy databases on Kubernetes. So there are several operators out there. You must have heard of some of them, right? So there are operators for Postgres, for Kafka, right? Operators for MySQL, for Redis, and other database technologies, right? So how does Kubernetes handle this storage? So I'm just giving a background to give you some understanding, right? Whether you're new to the data on Kubernetes community or you've been there for a while, right? You're just finding this talk on YouTube or anywhere else, right? So if you look at it from the ground up, right? When persistent storage, which is like storing data right, over time, over fields, right? So in the Kubernetes world, there are several ways, but like the way that's the most supported and the way that everyone talks about, right, on the Kubernetes layer is persistent volumes, right, which you create to define the data, right, wherever the data is being stored. Then you have the PVCs, which is persistent volume claims that a developer writes, right, to request a PV, right. Then on going down, right, further to the data layer, you have a container storage interface, which defines like the type of data and how let me explain it such a way. There are different types of data, right? There's a CEF, Cepher storage, there is ISCIS, there is AWS FS storage, there's Azure Blob storage. There are different kinds of storages, right? So a container storage interface is a standard way of writing storage plugins, right? And CSI plugins and drivers to access the storage wherever they be stored. So the PV, right, interacts with a container storage interface in order to access data. And you also get features like dynamic provisioning, resizing, snapshots, and cloning, right? So that is how like how we persist data in Kubernetes, right? So this is just a summary. I'm not diving in there because as with Kubernetes, there are so many other components and so many other things that come together to make it work, right? That is why it's flexible and can be used in several use cases. So putting it all together, right, looking at it from like the operator perspective, so the user applies a configuration, right? Let's say a request to make a deployment, right? So submits the configuration, the operator processes the request. So this may be, right, as you can see here, so maybe MySQL operator, Postgres operator, right, Cassandra or MongoDB, right? Then the stateful set creates pod in order to deploy the databases, right? Then PVCs, right? The PVC requests are bound to the persistent volumes, like we talked about. Then the database application is within the pod, right? Then the operator continually monitors the cluster to make sure that everything is as it should be, right? Just like if the pod fails, restart a new pod and having that sticky identity and all, right? So this just puts together basically what I'm doing, right? Maybe the right word is not basically right, but because it's not easy, right? What I'm explaining is how you can look at an operator from a high level perspective, right? How an operator works. So with this understanding, right, it feels as if that there is no need, right, for DBAs. It feels as if that operators, yes, there's a lot of automation, high availability, upgrades, and all, right, that we talked about. It seems that a regular Kubernetes engineer can manage databases at scale, right, and not have to worry about the skills of a DBA, right, and those technical perspective. So why the perceived decline? It didn't just start with Kubernetes, right? If you've been in the software space and technology space for a while, you know that this notion of DBAs are no longer important. They are changing the role, like that skill is no longer important. It didn't just start with Kubernetes, right? It started with managed DBAs. So if RDS, Azure Cosmos, and several other managed DBAs, right? So that's where the perceived decline started. And then it moves on to like specialized database platforms, like say Cockroach DB. I think there are several other Dragonfly and several other like databases, right? This is not to say that they are not great like database software that helps organizations get their job done, but it's just to say like where the notion of the perception of okay, we don't longer need DBAs, right? Because we have these automations and all, right? So then we have Kubernetes operators now, which is now still like portraying the point, and everyone is saying the skill of a DBA is dead and all that, right? So if you just take some time to think about it, right, and if you just take some time now as you're looking at this slide and think about, right, so since from going from managed DBAs, right, to specialized DBAs, specialized database platform or DBAS also, and Kubernetes operators, right? Have you, in your experience, haven't you like encountered issues with dealing with cost, right, or dealing with vendor locking, or dealing with there's so many other issues, right? That yes, the automation and the two operations is solved, right, by these platforms, but then again, it brings up another issue, right, that needs to be addressed and all, right. I will look into them briefly. And now, if you think about the fact that organizations, everyone wanted to go into the cloud, right, but now you look at the trends, right, organizations are thinking like on-prem or hybrid cloud, right, and the cloud just meaning that there is an interface you can access from anywhere and the UI and all. So it's just an idea. It's not really like you all know that the cloud is just another computer, right? But yeah, someone else's computer. So yeah, so the power of Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes operator. That's why you see that this is more being talked about, right? So this was a conversation on Reddit, and there's a long thread, right? But this brief conversation, right? And someone explained, right? Okay, running stateful workloads on Kubernetes is most cost effective long term, right? And avoids vendor locking of managed services and cloud providers. And this is very true, right? And Kubernetes now is can be moved on prem and all that. So even though we know that Kubernetes on GKE is not the same as Kubernetes on EKS, right? Which is AWS manage Kubernetes service. Neither is it the same as Azure, right? If you, okay, just the most basic and the fundamental understanding that I keep using the word basic, but the most fundamental understanding, you know that you don't have access to the control plane, that GKE manages the control plane, right? Or AWS manages the control plane for you. So that gives you some understanding, right, of that. So then again, as you can see from the continuing the conversation, many folks here have said that you need workforce with experience in Kubernetes and some knowledge about the state you're managing to make life easier. Then he talks about like how operators like makes life easier, right? Then the perceived decline, right? So this was a reply for someone still in this stress. I presume that this means that DBAs have to upskill on Kubernetes. Yes, which is true, as we already have Kubernetes engineer. Then he now said, seeing right, they already he or she now said, or they or them, he's seen that they're already Kubernetes engineers, right? Does this make the traditional DBA role defunct, right? And while Kubernetes operators automate many traditional DBA tasks, right? Like deployment from for a start, HA, upgrades, and all, right? It doesn't eliminate the need for DBAs, right? Then we'll go over to the next section of the talk, which is the DBA's continued importance in the Kubernetes era. And now, a further going down the conversation, right? Another reply from a Reddit user, which is the real reality, right? You said, I wouldn't say default, but as anything in this industry, we need to adapt and learn new tools, right? So from the DBA perspective, it would mean that they will need to tune the database, right, by setting up specific fields. So now, if you look at it, specific fields in the CRD, which is custom resource definition. So if you look at it like for performance tuning, right, in the MySQL space, you know that InnoDB buffer pool size is an essential thing that you know that you might change over time, right? So how would you do that when a database is deployed on Kubernetes, when a database is deployed by MySQL operator, right? So that is one of the skills, right? Instead of doing that in a regular config file, right, or MySQL config file, you will do that like in Kubernetes, right? Maybe using config maps, right, or other Kubernetes resources. And now for monitoring, instead of using, let's say, PMM, right, or Nagios or any other monitoring tool, right, you use Prometheus, right, to monitor slow queries and to track like other metrics, right? So like they might not be traditional DBA tasks like which you say that a DBA deploy, okay, carry the rack and go and install on-prem or not, right? Even though we still have to do that in an on-prem landscape, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to say, right? They may be fully automated, all those tasks, but then again, there are several aspects to managing a database, right? If you think about it, a database is the core of anything that exists, right? Data is the core of anything that exists, right? And database is the most valuable asset of every organization, because the UI, the front end, the back end, the application feeds off of that data, right? Even AI feeds off on data, right? And you can automate as much things as possible, right? But then again, there are some things that can be automated, right? Which we'll look at. I know you already thought of them, right? The database design itself, right? You is a human being that will know what they need, right? So that's you wouldn't want a Kubernetes engineer that don't really have that much depth, right, and experience with database to design your data model, right, on Kubernetes. I don't know if you get, so that's just a typical example, right? And so this is the real reality, right, which is the purpose of this talk. They need to be evolving rules. And just like every aspect like of software, right, before engineers became Kubernetes engineers, they were, let's say, Jenkins engineers, right? Even though Jenkins is not as popular as Kubernetes is during its time, right? They are I'm trying to look for a more popular DevOps engineers, right, per se. They use the other tools, right? Over time, we all need to learn to use more tools in order to better the way we deploy and manage software. So once on Kubernetes, right, who's going to take care of other things, right? Just like I mentioned. So once on Kubernetes, who's going to take care of data modeling? Just like I mentioned, right? So if you think about it, everyone say, let's go to the cloud, let's go to the cloud. You go to RDS. Even while deploying a database on RDS, right, you have some configurations to make. You have some decisions to take. How are you sure of like if this is the right decision you're going to take, right? And I was talking with an engineer, a DBA slash platform engineer, right? And they had an issue that, okay, they deployed a multi-tenant database on RDS, right? But then again, later down the line in the future, so this was 5 years ago. Now in the future, last year, right, one of their clients needed to install PG Vector, right, for PG Vector for vector database to store embeddings, right, for vector databases, right? But then again, RDS, the RDS setup, right, was set up in a way that if they install PG Vector on one instance, it goes all to all the tenants, right? So that issue, being able to detect all those kind of issues, right? Because you can just via a few clicks, right, select an option, but then again, how you sure like that option is the right option? What's the implication, right? You get, yes, in the future, maybe AI will be able to define everything and think better than humans, right? Which obviously we don't want. If not, they will replace humans. But then again, you understand like some things, some scenarios and stuff that you may not be thinking about now or you haven't thought about in the past, right? Then query optimization, we are all guilty of this, right? If you've ever written an SQL query, your very first SQL query was an expensive query. And I believe that everyone will agree with me on this, right? So query optimization, like especially like if you are dealing with, if you are your database is intended to handle so many writes, right, or so many reads, right, or so many, or is IO intensive, so many read, many writes, right, and now you have like queries that are poorly written, and when if you imagine on the cloud, right, when your queries are taking much time, right, if you think about it from an algorithmic perspective, you're paying more, right? You're paying more, and now on the Kubernetes perspective, right, the pods uh, there's more resource usage, right? So this is also a problem. Yeah, it may not be down to the Kubernetes there, but then again, an application developer, right, or someone that needs to access the database will write queries to access the database. So this is something to consider. Also indexing, right? This is something that needs to be thought about, right? How you access your data, the indexing of your data, right? So, okay, DBMS technical watch, right? PG Postgres few years ago is not Postgres today, right? So recently, if you've used Postgres and been in the Postgres space, you know that the Postgres 16 brought about bidirectional logical replication, right? So let's say a Kubernetes engineer that like was, let's say a DevOps engineer and have been dealing with tools, right? And now an organization make a decision that, okay, we don't need a DBA, we don't need to hire DBA, we have an operator and all, and they just take a crash course on or learn some things about Postgres and all, and through the documentation of the operator, right? So over time, how will they know what changes and what changes in the data underlying database software, right? Well, how would they be able to make decisions, right? So would they have known about like logical replication before thinking about bidirectional logical replication, which is a publish and subscribe model, right? So think about it from that perspective. And also performance investigation, like I mentioned, like tuning DB buffer size, right? Understanding locking problems, and also support of developers, because like I said, and you are the databases, the database that is stored on is the lifeblood of everything of an organization. So it's something to take as much care as possible, right? So you can't say that the DBA will become default, right? Those skills cannot be default, right? So, like I mentioned, right, are we going to bring the issues we had with managed cloud divas, writing poor queries and all, and bring it to Kubernetes, right? So there's no improvement, and things that have been fundamental, and the fundamentals is lost, right? And if you look at most DBAs, that you see that like most people that have core and deep understanding of databases, right? They are rare, right? And some of them are working in organizations like RDA, like AWS, right? Or they are working on something they can't really talk about. So it's a rare skill, right? That needs to be talked about more, and there needs to be more knowledge sharing. And over time, we'll have fewer people, right, that can manage databases the way that the traditional DBA can manage databases. And now with organizations trying to go on-prem, so you don't be on-prem and be thinking about things from a cloud perspective, right? Yes, you can have like a private cloud, hybrid cloud, and all, but things changes, right, as you go on-prem. And those specialty skills, like say, okay, think from a networking perspective, right? So firewall and all that's being done on AWS VPC or DigitalOcean VPC is not the same as doing it in co-located environment, or doing it in your own data centers, right? And all that. So simple but impactful issues which I've already mentioned, right? Let's say a database model without a primary key depends, right? There are several databases systems, right? So no index, right? In very simple cases, no respect of normal forms, spaghetti queries, right? Which in turn cost more, right, over time. And many, many more issues, right? Bringing it to Kubernetes, those fundamental issues. And organizations will complain about cloud cost, cloud cost, cloud cost. But then again, or like server cost or whatever cost, right? But then again, there are some things that beyond the type of infrastructure you do, right? There's some things that you do, especially on data, that brings about those costs, right? So skills and collaboration. So now how there can DBAs, right? DBAs that have this in-depth skill and experience, how can they like work in the Kubernetes space, right? So like I mentioned, the requirements for there to be success, it requires the skills, right? And also collaboration from organizations. Is not just a one perspective approach, right? It needs to be intentional, especially in an organization. So if you're watching this now or later on, if you're a decision maker, so think about it, right? So like we know Kubernetes is yes to say. You hear things about like people I see saying Kubernetes would be like Linux, right? Which is core and is everywhere, and in airplanes we fly on, right? In the future. And some conversations I've had, right, with people that have been in software space for like 20, 30 years, they agree with that notion. And also they say like maybe we might see Kubernetes in our microwaves, right? Those kind of things. So obviously to be relevant, right? And also as engineers as we are, right, we are also want to be thinking with the next thing. So then again, it's imperative that you have to like learn, all right, and join the bandwagon per se, right? So managing databases on Kubernetes, you need to know that stateful sets shrink and grow, right, in a sequence. Right? So you cannot just queue to stateful sets, right? Because like your database is gone, right? It depends if you don't have backups. So thinking about it from that perspective, you need to know how like that a pod has multiple containers, right? And you can put an init container in it. You can put a login agent, login container in it. You need to know how to define liveness and readiness probe, right? To be sure, okay, is the database ready to receive traffic, right? All those kind of stuff, right? You need to understand how to handle services, right, that provide access to the database, right? So how would you define your services? What would you use? Are you using Cilium for this? Are you like there are so many aspects, right? So many considerations, right? You need to know how to debug a pod, right? When this pod is running, to prevent him from the famous crash loop, right? So I gave an example of bringing a whole Galera MySQL Galera cluster down. So all these are really important considerations, right? And the summary is you just need to understand Kubernetes, right? Understand Kubernetes. I would say, in my opinion, from my experience talking with DBAs and working with database softwares, right, and being from the builder perspective and also from a user perspective, I would say understand Kubernetes enough from from a developer's perspective, so I would say like CKAD. Then from an administrator's perspective, I would say like CKA, right? Because like database DBA, database administrator, right? So, but then again, having core a DBA has core understanding of Linux, right? And administration. So it's not like a hard upskilling to do, right? And understand Kubernetes enough to be able to collaborate with engineers in your organization, right? To be able to offer them support, to be able to make those changes, to be able to tune the database, right? And all that, right? And now, how can you do this? And I wanted to go, we already almost done with time. I wanted to go in depth, like saying, okay, maybe take this course, do this and all. But my experience, and last week or 2 weeks ago, I was speaking with an Oracle DBA, right, who has been experimenting with Kubernetes, deployed a Pac-Man game that had state, safe state, and all that. And it's planning on sharing his experience on that in a talk, right? So experiment, build project, just like your normal life as an engineer, right? We are all experimenting with our home lab. I believe everyone here have some form of home lab, even if it may just be your local computer, right? Or you have deployed, you have like some mini racks in your house, or a used computer system that you use to experiment or stuff. So experiment. So if you're you're a MySQL person, right? You can see the open source MySQL operator that is offered by Oracle, right? If you're a Postgres person, you guys can use the Zalando Postgres operator or the cloud native PG operator, right? And experiment and break things, or just use like persistent volumes, right? And see how it goes, right? So that gives you understanding, and with the already existing experience of Linux and understanding of software and data, right? It won't be a hard thing to like upskill on. And if you want to learn more, as always, this is a data on Kubernetes community call, right? So you can join the community Slack channel, and I put Paul's email address here, who is the manager of the community, and right, and follow on LinkedIn, right? And scan this QR code to join the Slack community. Then also, I am a manager of this community, Sovereign DBAs community. So where we have organizations that are people from organizations that are wanting to have more control of their data, right? And deploy their database and have control, not be locked in, right? So you can scan to join this community. You can mail me. I'll find the community on LinkedIn too, right? So we have engineers from different organizations like Starbucks and other organizations, right? And also DBAs that have upskilled in Kubernetes, right? So you can ask them more specific questions and all that, and engage and learn just as you would normally learn from a community perspective. Then another resource I want to share is this particular article written by Gabriel, who is a data on Kubernetes ambassador and one of the leading figures in the cloud native in Postgres on Kubernetes, right? And from EDB, who are the creators of the cloud native PG, right? Which is the cloud native Postgres operator. So this article is very interesting article, right? I think it was published in August 2024, which is like about 6-7 months ago, right? So the urge of T-shaped profiles to smooth the challenge of running Postgres in Kubernetes. It focuses and explains more about like the need for DBAs, right? To bring that perspective, that understanding, and the need to upskill, right? And I believe I've contributed like I've contributed my part, right, into like this and sharing and talking about this need. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you very much for taking your time to watch this talk, whether live or later on in the future. And my name is Divine Odazie, as I mentioned earlier. You can catch me on Twitter at _Odazie or Divine Odazie on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in listening to like a podcast, right? So at several nights we did a podcast episode with Eddie was Seth, right? Who is the data on Kubernetes member, right? And he talked about like how Kubernetes is changing the landscape, right, from his perspective, working at Verizon and Ericsson and all the organizations. So thank you very much for taking your time to listen to me, and do have a great rest of the week and weekend ahead. And see you at the next DOK Community Town Hall.
All right. Well, that's it. Thanks, Divine, for your presentation. Like yeah, I said earlier in the call, Divine wasn't able to be here live, so we pre-recorded that. So normally we would take questions, but if you do have questions about that presentation, you can either send them to me on Slack, LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Divine. He's also on the DOK Slack, also on LinkedIn. If you have those questions, feel free to send them his way or my way. But other than that, yeah, I want to thank again Divine for putting that presentation together. It was really informative. I think really useful for a lot of people. And yeah, we'll see you hopefully in a couple weeks with Jonathan Battiato, who'll be talking about Cloud Native PG. And then, of course, again, later in the month in March, we'll have our panel of women in DOK space. So I'm excited for that. Yeah, so have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you at the next one. All right, bye-bye.